Tēnā koutou katoa. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the first webinar in the Pacific Regional Security Hub's Tide of Change webinar series. My name is Jose Santos, and I'll be chairing this webinar. I'm an Associate Professor of Practice and the lead and convener of the Pacific Regional Security Hub, which is housed in the Macmillan Brown Centre for the Pacific Studies at the University of Canterbury. The Pacific Regional Security Hub, or PRSH, was established in November 2024 in recognition of a critical need to deepen conversations, research, and networks between and across the Pacific thinkers and scholars in response to increased geopolitical tension being paid to the region. We are very proud to provide this space, and we would like to acknowledge the UK government who supports the PRSH and are enabling the work we do, which includes establishing a cohort of leading thinkers and scholars in the Pacific, 3 of whom we will hear from today, formalizing institutional relationships across the Pacific, which provide clear pathways for partnership activities and collaboration, a discussion paper publication series, a blog series, and at the end of March, we are very excited that we are holding a symposium in partnership with the Pacific Islands Forum to address the challenge of transnational crime. The Pacific Regional Security Hub is about connections and conversations. The Tides of the Pacific webinar series is a platform for interdisciplinary Pacific agency and voices in regional human security, geopolitics, regional conflict, peace building, climate crisis, and other security-related aspects. To that end, it is my pleasure to introduce our 4 distinguished speakers who will be well known to all of you. Our first speaker is Mr. Lopeti Sinituli, who is the former president of the Tongan Law Society, the former advisor to the Prime Minister of Tonga, and the former CEO of the Tongan Ministry of Internal Affairs. And of course, a PRSH visiting fellow. Mr. Sinituli will be speaking to the political standoff between Tonga's king and its prime minister. Thank you, Mr. Sinituli. Our second speaker is Associate Professor Tess Newton-Kane, who is an adjunct associate professor at Griffith University and the Pacific Regional Security Hub visiting fellow. She'll be speaking about the parliament dissolution and a snap election in Vanuatu. Our third speaker is Dr. Levi Tavita, who is a political scientist at the National University of Samoa, a Pacific Regional Security Hub visiting fellow, and will be speaking about the current political showdown in Samoa. Our fourth and final speaker is Distinguished Professor Stephen Ratuva, Pro Vice Chancellor Pacifica at Canterbury University and the Director of the Macmillan Brown Centre for the Pacific Studies. Professor Ratuva will be discussing the constitutional and judicial challenges in Fiji. Each of the speakers has 10 to 12 minutes, followed by approximately 25 minutes of discussion. Please submit your questions via the chat and identify who you are directing your questions to. We would appreciate it if you could please identify yourself when you submit your question. We will try to get to them all. Now I invite our first speaker, Mr. Sinituli, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jose. Malolele, everyone. I'm happy to be participating in this first inaugural webinar for the Pacific Regional Security Hub. And my topic is the standoff between the King of Tonga and the Prime Minister, or the former Prime Minister who resigned in December last year. Our former Prime Minister, Sovaleni, resigned on the 9th of December, and in his resignation speech, which was unexpected because it was made on the day that they met to discuss the second vote of no confidence in him, he actually said in his resignation speech that he had mistakenly thought that this was a free country. He said in Tongan, "Koe whanua tawataina." Tawataina can mean free or it can mean independent. But he hinted that the king had put pressure on the 9 nobles representatives in parliament, elected representatives, that is, to abandon him on the eve of the vote of no confidence. And he had seen the numbers the day before or the night before, and he knew that he would lose the vote of no confidence on that day, and he resigned. He had survived a similar vote of no confidence the year before in 2003. So by seeing that the nobles reps had, who had voted for him to get in as the prime minister in 2002, he saw that he didn't have a chance of surviving, so he resigned. And this came in December last year, but early in February of last year, the king withdrew his confidence and trust in Sovaleni as the Minister for Home Affairs and Defense, and the Minister for His Majesty's Armed Forces, which is our Ministry of Defense, and as well as Fekita Utukamanu as the Minister for Foreign Affairs in February of that year, last year. Now, according to the Constitution, the king cannot sack any minister without the prime minister's approval. And the Constitution states, a minister shall retain his position as minister until his appointment is revoked by the king on the recommendation of the prime minister, or in accordance with clause 50B, which is to do with election bribery. So the king could not sack the prime minister as Minister for His Majesty's Armed Forces or the Minister for Foreign Affairs. All he could do was express his withdrawal of confidence and withdrawal. And of course, rumors were that the king wanted his own son, that is the Crown Prince, to be the Minister for Home Affairs, His Majesty's Armed Forces, or the Minister for Defense. I use defense, which is shorter and quicker. Minister for Defense, and the Crown Prince's sister, who was up to now our High Commissioner to Canberra, and the king wanted her to be the Minister for Foreign Affairs. That's the rumor. But the Prime Minister, at first, when the announcement was made in February that the king had withdrawn his confidence, the Prime Minister was in New Zealand. And the acting Prime Minister, Sami Waipulu, he issued a statement saying that the cabinet had confidence in these two ministers. Anyway, by the time the Prime Minister came back, he decided that he would do a Tongan style of apology to the king, which we call the hula wifi. You tie the leaves of the iwi tree around your head and beg for an apology for any perceived mistake. So, but the idea was that they would apologize. But the rumor is that the king expected the prime minister to nominate someone or some people to replace them as Minister for Defense and the Minister for Foreign Affairs. And Prime Minister Sovaleni didn't. Right up until the day of his resignation, he did not nominate anyone because, according to the Constitution, the king can only appoint a minister on the recommendation of the prime minister, which is quite different from our 2010 Constitution. In our 2010 Constitution, in the Constitution prior to 2010, the king could appoint his ministers from anywhere, from outside Parliament or inside Parliament, and on their appointment, they are appointed as ministers for life, and some of them actually did stay as cabinet ministers for life. But the king lost that prerogative in 2010, and so now, in order to appoint someone to the king to appoint someone to the cabinet, he had to have the minister nominate that person, and of course, Prime Minister Sovaleni didn't. And as a result, the king then lobbied or forced the nobles' representatives in cabinet to withdraw. And there were three cabinet ministers who were nobles' representatives. They withdrew from cabinet, or they resigned from cabinet on the eve of the vote of on the eve of the parliamentary session on the vote of no confidence on 9th of December. So that's why the Prime Minister resigned. Now, the other thing that that is interesting to note at this stage is that when the king lost his prerogative to appoint cabinet ministers from anywhere and for life at his pleasure, the nobles were, there are 26 members of parliament, and there are 9 of the 26 nobles, representatives voted in. So that 9 carries it's quite they are the kingmakers. If you want to be prime minister, you get those nobles to be on your side. And every elections we've held since 2010 have had the nobles figure, except perhaps for Akalisi's election in 2017, after the king had vetoed parliament. Sorry, after the king dissolved parliament in 2017. And in the new election, general elections, Akalisi won, and this time he won with enough people's representative out of the 17 to govern on his own. And he did not need the nobles' vote in order to become prime minister. So when this new prime minister, Eke, appointed his new cabinet ministers in January this year, there was not a single nobles representative in the cabinet, except, of course, except the king's son, who is not an elected nobles representative. He was elected from he was nominated from outside of the cabinet, and there were 3 people's, in other words, people's representatives who were not elected, but they were nominated to cabinet from outside. And this was Minister for Health, who is a professional doctor, the Minister for Agriculture, who is a agriculturalist by profession, who has spent a lot of time in many of the Pacific Island countries helping the different agricultural departments, and he spent some time with SPC, Secretariat of the Pacific Community, for some years. And the third, of course, is a woman who works with business people here, especially the small time growers. And so those were the 4 new people's, 4 new ministers who were not elected representatives. So the interesting is that none of these people were nobles, elected nobles representatives. So that's the situation. And I'm worried because it's showing that the king is trying to exert his influence on the government of the day. One of the major changes in 2010 is the devolution of the executive authority from the king in Privy Council to the Prime Minister and cabinet, including the appointment of ministers. And here it is, the king is trying to take back some of that power. And I'm sorry to say, when this king was prime minister from 2001, middle of 2001 to early 2006, he led the charge on the placing more constitutional limitations and more legislative limitations on the freedom of speech. So I'm worried if he gets more powers in his hands, he can revert to his more, how do you say, more anti-democratic behavior. He was also prime minister in 2005 when the civil servants went on strike for better pay. And it was a prolonged strike, and the civil servants won that battle, although that's a different story as to how they won. But that gives you an idea of what our king's past is. I'm not saying that he will do so again, because since he ascended to the throne in 2012, when his older brother, King George V, died in office, he has shown some remarkable understanding of what is needed for a democratic government to function in this day and age. So I'm confident that he will do the right thing, but at the same time, his past is a worrying feature of his. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salituli, for your insightful presentation. I'd like to now pass over to Associate Professor Tess Newton-Kane. Thank you, Tess.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you to yourself and Professor Ratuva for the invitation to join you for this webinar today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands that I'm joining you from. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and I extend that respect to any First Nations people who are joining us today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what has been happening recently in politics in Vanuatu. As many of you are aware, Vanuatu politics can be very volatile, often described as unstable. And since the back end of last year, we've had one of these periods of instability, which has led us to where we are now. And I'll come back to where we are now in a minute. So just to go back over what happened late last year, there was an anticipated vote of no confidence in the then Prime Minister, Shalo Salwai, put forward by the leader of the opposition and various other individuals and groupings seeking to effect a change of government and unseat Salwai as Prime Minister. There was that process previously in Vanuatu. We've seen that process go relatively smoothly, as in everybody knows what's needed, everybody knows how it works, and it either fails or it succeeds, and then everybody kind of sits down and gets back to what they were previously doing. This time, we saw, as we have seen previously, that the process became very messy, very contested, and in the end, it was decided, or the president was petitioned by the Prime Minister to dissolve Parliament, which he subsequently did, President Vurubaravu. Now that was also quite contested and has resulted in legal action. But the fact is that the dissolution of Parliament went ahead and elections were called. Under the terms of the Vanuatu Constitution, it is a requirement that elections are held within 60 days of Parliament having either ended or been dissolved. And so that meant that we were expecting elections on the 14th of January at that stage. January is not a great time to have elections in Vanuatu, as is the case in other parts of the Pacific. People are away, they're with family, often come back to home villages or home islands. And it's also smack bang in the middle of cyclone season. So it's, it presents some logistical challenges. So it's a snap election which has its own issues around cost and mobilization. And it was a snap election being held at an awkward time of year. This was then all further complicated by the devastating earthquake that hit Port Vila on the 17th of December, causing upwards of a dozen deaths, a huge amount of damage in the central business district, displacement of people, loss of income and livelihoods, a really major event that's going to pose challenges for this government, not just in the initial stages, but probably for the duration of the life of this parliament. So that meant that was an added complication in terms of having the elections. The elections could not be deferred because of the constitutional limitation. They were moved out by 2 days to give people a bit of extra time, particularly in Port Vila, where the impact of the earthquake was most significant. But the elections did go ahead. They went, as is normally the case in Vanuatu, they went ahead relatively smoothly. There are obviously logistical challenges in terms of getting ballot boxes to where they need to be and getting them back so that they can be counted. But We saw the elections go ahead with very little by way of disruption, no violence to speak of. We've had 5 electoral petitions lodged since the election, so that kind of indicates that it was generally a well controlled and a well delivered process, even though it did actually include quite a significant change to the mechanics of that election, which I won't talk about, but I'm happy to come back to that in questions. So obviously, what the other thing that meant is that for the duration of the immediate response period after that disaster in December, we had a caretaker government, which made it very difficult in terms of reallocating budgets or accessing particular pots of financing, or even entering into agreements with partners to provide support. So we were kind of needing to wait for the government to fall into place. That's now happened. Jotham Napat was elected Prime Minister with 50 votes in a 52-seat parliament 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's in place. It's his first time as Prime Minister. He's been a minister previously, comes with a lot of public sector experience, including as Director General for the Ministry of Climate Change. He's appointed a cabinet, and just yesterday, I think they released their 100-day plan. So it's all systems go for this new government in Vanuatu. Now, kind of sitting around all of this are some really big issues. One is dealing with the earthquake, and I think it's, just to set that in context for those of you that have visited Port Vila and have some understanding of what it looks like, we are expecting 20 buildings in the CBD to be demolished. I think we're up to about number 5 or 6 now. So for a small city like Port Vila, that is a significant impact in terms of just what it looks like and what's available by way of infrastructure. And those spread across privately owned buildings, government owned buildings, and everything else. So what happens in Port Vila, and given that it is the administrative centre and it's a tourism centre, it's obviously an economic centre, that's going to be a really big part of what this government deals with in the near to medium term. And some of it will be longer term stuff as well. Another issue that I guess is kind of bubbling alongside all of this is, what can we expect in terms of increased stability or not in the Vanuatu context? As we know, since about 1991, there's been a series of periods of instability in which we've seen changes of government, parliaments being dissolved, people swapping sides, prime ministers being dethroned, and we've had all of that, and it's very well documented. Obviously, I'm not, as I always say, nobody makes money betting on politics in Vanuatu, so I'm not going to make any predictions. If we look back at what happened after Cyclone Pam, which was another major disaster that hit Vanuatu in 2015, there was a change of government relatively soon after that. But then that government, which was under Salwai as Prime Minister, did survive for the whole 4 year of the electoral cycle. So, it may be that having this big focus of rebuilding Port Vila will galvanize some desire to come together, work together, and stay together to get important work done. We've also had some significant changes to the Constitution, and they will come into effect. They come into effect now, as opposed to having come into effect when they were legislated. So one of those means that if a member of parliament leaves their party and goes to sit on the other side of the house, their seat immediately becomes vacated. So which will avoid what we've had previously, where we've had people sitting on both sides of the houses, all claiming to be part of one party, but actually sitting in both government and opposition. And the other reform is that people who have been elected as either independents or as single member parties, so there's only one of them in their whole party, they are required within 3 months of Parliament convening, they're required to align with a bigger party. So, and then they have to stay there for the duration of the parliament. If they try to move again, their seat becomes vacated. So this dilutes the influence of what the independent bloc. And I mean, it's not, there is certainly more than one parliament in which the largest number of seats is those held by independents and single member parties. So, but it dilutes their ability to work together to destabilize or to try and affect a change of government. Obviously, it's very early days. We don't know whether those reforms will be sufficient to bring about the stability that's needed or that's required. There is a degree of contestation around this, particularly that second one about saying that independents have to lock themselves into a bigger party. Some people have felt that that is a democratic infringement, that it goes against the whole idea of being elected as an independent, is that you are allowed to use your voice and your vote to support or not support, depending on what your values are. I think the counterpoint to that, or a potential counterpoint to that, is that Vanuatu politics is not really philosophically driven. A lot of the alliances are not really around ideology, whether it's around how the economy should go or even environmental concerns. It's the parties and the alliances are built much more around personal relationships, kinship relationships, and personal alliances. The Vanuatu Parliament does have one woman sitting in it. So it was a close-run thing whether she would get elected, but she represents the Port Vila constituency. So it was a tough fight to get in, but she's also in a very important constituency. She, as a Port Vila MP, she'll be involved in the recovery for the city, and she also, being in the capital, means that she has much more access to a whole range of things, whether it's the business community, the diplomatic corps, international donors, or whatever. So she comes from having been the deputy lady mayor, so she does have a degree of political experience. There's a big job ahead for this parliament and this government. Generally, I think people are feeling quite positive. Jossam Napat is seen as someone who gets stuff done. He's a doer himself, and he kind of insists on getting stuff done. In terms of his rhetoric, he does have a tendency to shoot from the hip, and we've seen that already. So I think that will be something of interest to watch as we go along. Thank you, Josette.
Thank you very much, Tess, for your insightful presentation. I'd like to now welcome Dr. Levy. Thank you, Dr. Levy. I'd like to now welcome Dr. Levy.
Do you hear me, Joseph?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You, sir?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, Talofalava once again. My Lord, so for Moa. Yeah, warm greetings from Samoa. Yeah, my name is Levi Tavita, senior lecturer at Center of Samoan Studies here at the National University of Samoa. And first, I would like to thank the organizers of the webinar for the opportunity to contribute to this important dialogue. In fact, I was looking forward to this meeting, as I haven't got much opportunity to reconnect with Stephen, and my UC colleagues since we left Christchurch in 2022. I told Stephen that this university is facing power outage at the moment. I have to borrow my wife's working space to be in a webinar. Yeah, so can I start by saying that Samoan politics is in disarray? And I'll come back to that in a moment. But we are facing power outages in the island of Upolu. That's where Abia is for the past 2 weeks. And the rainy weather wouldn't bode well for the country's mood either. And so nothing seems right here in Abia at the moment, and there's still more to come. So if I can just briefly provide a context of the political situation for Samoa in the past 2 months or so when this political drama unfolded. January 2025, Lauli, the FAST party chairman, was charged by police with 3 counts of conspiracy or attempt to defeat or pervert the course of justice, one of conspiracy to commit an offense, fabricate evidence, and one of harassment, utilizing means of electronic communication, 3 counts of false statements causing harm to a person's reputation, and 2 counts of using insulting words with intent to provoke a breach of the peace. The Prime Minister, Fiamé, summoned Lauli to ask for his resignation from his ministerial duties based on those charges. Lauli refused to step down, saying he hasn't done anything wrong. The Prime Minister, in response, threatened to use their power to force him out of office. In response, Lauli summoned a meeting of the party in which members unanimously voted against the Prime Minister Fiamé and called for her resignation on the grounds that they no longer have confidence in her leadership. The vote included some of the cabinet ministers who stood by her. The Prime Minister Fiamé retaliated by sacking some of her ministers, including Lauli, who voted against her and replaced them with new appointees. The outcome of which was a split in the party, 2 factions, one under Fiamé, 15 members in total, the other under Lauli, 20 in total. The opposition party has 18 members. Thus, in practice, Samoa is run under a minority government. Now, in a meeting of Parliament on the 26th of February, the HRPP proposed a vote of no confidence in Fiamé's leadership. And just to remind you that HRPP is the opposition party for Samoa at the moment. And it wouldn't sustain, the motion wouldn't sustain. They only have 17 votes, and one of their members abstained. Lauli's faction was against the motion for own reasons, so they didn't vote with the HRPP to support the motion of no confidence. Now, the minority government of Fiamé may have survived the no confidence motion for at least a week now, but as you may have heard, the Lauli faction is prepared to try it once again. They have noted the Speaker of its intention to propose own motion of no confidence in Fiamé's minority government. So yesterday in Parliament, some difficult questions have been directed at the Speaker. First from the Prime Minister, who demanded that some clarification on the reintroduction of the motion of no confidence. She argued that this matter has been dealt with already, and Parliament has been unanimous in supporting her as Prime Minister. The Speaker thought otherwise, and he ruled for the motion to be put through this coming Thursday, but it has to be in written form. So it may be that before the end of this week, Samoa has a new Prime Minister. Otherwise, Fiamé may play the card only she can, that is to seek counsel with the head of state for the dissolution of Parliament, something which the Lauli faction is trying to avoid, but the opposition would very much like to happen. So basically, that's the sort of a context that we are talking at this moment. I wouldn't go much further than, I'll be happy to answer some questions, on what's been going on, but that's what's the scenario here in Samoan politics at the moment. I just want to make a point that while Samoa's political situation may be quite fragile or volatile, the rule of law still holds sway. Looking back, Samoa has been through the same path of similar situations in the 70s, 80s, and in our last general elections. Many of you have been well informed of, without much, without any violence or intervention as such. And I think that such durability is proof of the type of democracy that we have, and Samoa's positive attitude to the rule of law taking its course in any such situation. So that's probably why yeah, even though politics is sort of like a rough and tumble in Parliament, but I mean, everything's, the general outlook for Samoa is, is that there's still peace, order, and harmony here. Yeah, so yeah, that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Levy, for clearly unpacking the complexities of the current Samoan politics and the current situation. Turning to you, Professor Tuva, Steve.
Thanks so much, Jose. Thanks so much, Tess, Lopeti, and Levy for the very, very inspiring, enriching presentation. Now, as my colleagues were talking, my heart was thinking about, or rather my mind was thinking about, and my heart was feeling the fact that the diversity of political dynamics in the Pacific is such that it's not possible to make generalizations about what's happening in the Pacific, as some people would want to do. The term arc of instability, some of those terms which are quite patronizing, does not play out here. The specific circumstances are very much a normal part of the way in which the politics plays out. And that's something we're sharing here. Now, we're supposed to be talking about Fiji, and unlike the other countries which have been discussed earlier, Fiji now is in a period of what I would call political overload. The number of things which are unraveling all at once, and it's not possible just to choose one aspect of things and then run with it. You have political party shifts since the Fiji First Party, which had been in power for a long time, was deregistered, and the parliamentarians move in all directions. You have the judiciary in a state of turmoil at the moment, and the call for constitutional changes, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which has been set up. So all these things together. So it's it's not easy to unpack what to talk about. So what I'll try to do is being very, very selective, given the limited time of only about 12 minutes, just to look at some of the significant aspects of things, and perhaps some of the processes and some of the connections as we move on. First of all, the political roller coaster ride, if I may call it that, has been quite interesting. I won't go as far back as the last 3, 4, 5 years. I remain within the last few months since last year, because of limited time. Since the Fiji First deregistration, the party led by Bainimarama, who ended up in prison, now is back, who led the coup in 2006. So its deregistration meant that the dominant political force, which has been in power in Fiji, broke up, and you have the group of 9 politicians who joined the coalition government, and those who remain as opposition. Let's talk about the case of Vanuatu, where political parties don't necessarily have political ideologies separate from each other. It's very much similar in Fiji, where political parties are very much based on either personalities or particular groups with common interest, or linked to to communities, whether from a particular geographical area, or people with generally communal thinking about particular issues and so forth. So the clear line of demarcation in terms of ideology is minimal. So that's why it's easy for people to move from one political party to another. Now, and of course, there have been talk about new political parties emerging. That's nothing new in Fiji. We've had almost in every election, we'll have about 3 or 4 new political parties emerging. They come and go. Some continue to be sustainable long term. The election, which is due in 2026, the last one was 3 years ago, you're going to find new political parties, at least 2 or 3, have been publicly pronounced to be to have political parties, new political parties. Now, so what we're beginning to look at now is with all this unraveling and movement of people, and of course with the coalition in power, three parties in coalition, the traditional party lines are beginning to be very, very blurred, not recognizable at all. Now the cabinet has incorporated new members of the old members of the Fiji First, and now we have much bigger and bloated cabinet. And because the Constitution provides for only one national constituency, the politicians don't seem to have any linkages with any particular area-based, territorial-based constituency. So as a result, they create their own constituencies in terms of their particular links. One of the rationale behind having just one national constituency was to force politicians to think in terms of national interest rather than communal interest. But that actually hasn't worked out pretty well. And the reason is that because politicians have communal links, they have links with particular interest groups, they create them. They're linked to them as, if you like, informal constituencies. So that has led to links of, well, communal loyalties, a network of patronage, and, you know, at times clientelism and so forth. And also what we've seen is the rise of transnational politics. Talking about Trump and his transnational politics, I think he's speaking right now. You're trying to compete with him. So the idea of I do this for your party, and then you do this for me, even if I lose the election. So there's a whole lot of that transactional politics taking place as well. Now, during the time of the Fiji First under Bainimarama, what you had was a very dichotomous politics, where politics very much defined. The term used in those days was the trench warfare politics. So you have two trenches in this, the so-called no man's land, no person's land. No one was there. If you dare walk into the territory, then you're shot from both sides. So that has kind of unraveled with a new system, with a new connections of loyalty, which has reemerged. Now, and then also one of the consequences of the politics of coups, what I call the political culture of coups, was the creation of this culture of vengeance. I remember making a warning many years ago that the nature of the way Fiji First was going in terms of some of the brutal aspects of their rule on the opponents, in imprisonment and torture and so forth, was going to create that culture of vengeance. And then if they lose the election and the people they were not only marginalizing, but brutalizing, coming to power, they're going to do exactly the same thing. That's what we're beginning to see now, the cycle of vengeance. So there has to be a way in which we have to try and stop that culture of the cycle of vengeance. Now, they have set up the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which is not geared towards that. It's for something else. I'll talk about that later. Now, while the 2013 Constitution has removed ethnic representation in Parliament, it has not totally taken away the ethnic dynamics in an informal, subconscious way and implicit way in the way politics is played out. You see that the racial vilification and so forth on both sides in the social media. So it finds its way in other forms, manifests itself in other forms. So again, those are some of the challenges in the political context. Now, there are many other things which I don't have time to talk about. And I'll jump straight into the second, if you like, crisis at the moment, which is the judicial crisis. Just looking at it, it's like a sequence of events. The sequence of events itself is like a Hollywood movie, a comic strip. So you have the removal of the director of public prosecution, and then he was reinstated after the review team recommended that he should be reinstated, unfair dismissal and all those. So the musical chairs game within the DPP itself, who's going to be acting DPP for the time being. And then when the DPP was reinstated, there were charges against him. He hasn't actually started because he's still based here. I think he's still in New Zealand. After more charges against him, and appointment of an acting director for 3 years, and of course the big one, the removal of the Attorney General, and the appointment of a new one from outside Parliament, and the removal of the acting commissioner of the Independent Commission Against Corruption, of FICAC. That has been a very, very controversial one. So there was these discussions around how some of the leading politicians were going to be charged by FICAC. FICAC was set up by the Fiji First Party as a way of addressing some of the corruption that was taking place. So it's part of the judicial system. At the same time, it is independent. So, and then they put together an external commissioner from New Zealand to investigate whether the commissioner was appointed fairly or not. Now, that led to other, even within that investigation, they had to appoint a QC from New Zealand to make in fact, from the university here. I have lunch with this guy every now and then to make a judgment on the suspension of the commissioner. The allegation that she was interfering with the evidence, interference with the FICAC staff during the investigation and so forth. I mean, these are just some of the selected aspects of some of the very, very dynamic movements within the judiciary. So what we see here, a number of things. It's the first time that the judiciary has gone through that sort of turmoil. The judiciary in Fiji has a history of being stable, and of course, it has to be stable, like in any other country, because the instability of the judiciary could mean that the instability of the country in terms of, because the judiciary is seen as the last bastion of justice in the country. So what's happening here is that individuals within the judiciary are using the law, which is supposed to facilitate and accommodate to serve the citizens. They're using the law against each other. So there's a lot of things happening here in terms of issues of broader principles of ethics and individual interests, the vindictiveness, and of course the different interpretations of some of the institutional norms and policies in the Constitution as well. And indeed, the external influence from outside, the political influence as well. So we have something which is borrowed from the political culture, which is you wear black glasses or spray paint. Use a spray paint to with the black glasses, you're not able to see the lines. So and with the spray paint, you can spray the lines, the rigid lines, so that they are smudged, so that it gives you an excuse to be able to move from one to do anything that you want. Now, and of course, then you have the constitutional ambiguity. Who's responsible for what? That's been part of the problem as well. People are finger pointing in relation to who should be doing the sacking and who should be doing the hiring, particularly in relation to the Fiji Independent Commission Against Corruption commissioner. And and then you have what I call the irony of transparency, where all these things are playing out in the public view, playing out in the media, in the cyberspace, and so forth. So a lot of those things are either incomplete in terms of the development of particular issues, or they're still in the middle of a crisis. So we're not. So the report by the team which is doing the review of the appointment of the commissioner of FICAC still has to be submitted, and they have asked for an extra 6 weeks. So a lot of money has been used in that, and a lot of turmoil has been created. So one of the reasons why it would be good for as a way forward, to review the justice system itself, the structure, the norms, the work culture, and then the introduction of the human-centered justice, because a lot of the culture which is developed from the time of the coups are still in play. Although we have a new government in power, a lot of the behaviors, a lot of the ways of doing things are still in play at the moment. Now, and of course, let me just quickly talk about how the political coup culture talked about earlier still plays out in the political arena as well as in the judiciary. One of that is the normalization of certain behaviors where lines of demarcation are no longer considered to be sacred or sacred in relation to their significance. So between the executive and the judiciary and the public service, in fact, the role of public service, the permanent secretaries, we no longer hear about them. That was the case under the Fiji First government, and that continued up until now. Although things have changed a lot in terms of the freedom of expression and the freedom of speech, but there's still some limitations. Again, these are things that still have to be addressed in terms of long-term stability of the country. And also one of the things that I think has been happening and I observe as well is the coup trauma. A lot of research has been happening in this particular area and how major events, whether environmental or political or social or cultural, have traumatized a particular generation and how that is passed on to other future generations through what is known as epigenetics. So genetic expressions of the parents change, and then that's passed down to the new generation. So the coups have created a lot of trauma amongst those who will live through it. And we still need a lot of research in these particular areas. The prevalence of drugs, of crime, of youth and family violence, for instance, manifestations of some of the trauma playing out, and how we address that, something which needs to be recognized first, and then we address them at some point. Now, then we also have the issue of constitutional changes. Now, the constitutional change, the idea of constitutional changes has been around since the current constitution came into being. It was very unpopular to a lot of people. And so people are waiting for the new election, new government, for changes to take place. From the first day, the government was talking about some of the AG in particular, talking about some of this. But recently, there have been movement in this direction. And one of the aspects of changes has to do with amending Chapter 11, which has to do with changing the Constitution or amending the Constitution. Because as it is, it's quite difficult to amend the Fiji Constitution. You need at least 3/4 of the members of Parliament, first of all, after going through 1, 2, 3 readings. And then the outcome is then put to a referendum, and you need 3/4 of the total number of registered voters to pass the Constitution. So they want to amend that just to make sure that the Constitution is amendable. Now, the thing about constitutional amendment is that if it's too easy to amend, then it becomes very, very volatile, very, very unstable. If it's too difficult to amend, then it can be problematic because people will start thinking of extra legal means to do it. In fact, people have been talking about that in Fiji. So it has to be a balance about it. So there has to be greater consultations with the public, within the parliamentary groups themselves. And the intention, the rationale, the purpose must be very, very clear and must be targeted towards national unity, progress, efficiency, rather than just being driven by personal interests or group interests of particular people. Now, the other aspect of the Constitution which people have been talking about in relation to amendment is 131, Section 131, which talks about the role of the military. Because it says it shall be the overall responsibility of the Republic of Fiji military forces to
Mr.
ensure at all
Servi, your
times.
time is up.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll be finishing very soon. I'm not looking, I haven't seen Jose. Yeah. So that is also subject to interpretation. Some might say that it's a normal role of the military to do that. Some might say that it's it gives the power, extra legal means, the military extra legal means to be able to make any of those changes. And the last thing is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I won't talk about that too much. So they're going through the process, hoping to address some of the issues of the coups in the past, in terms of some of the ways in which the coups have impacted on people and how they're able to address some of those. Sorry, I think I've gone over the time. I was looking for Jose to give me his card, but I didn't see that. So I'll just stop there. And if there are any questions later, I'll be happy to respond to them.
Laka level, Steve. Thank you, Lopetti, Tess, Levy, and Steve for sharing your deep insights on key political dynamics taking place in our region. I would like to now turn to the floor and to your questions, and we will try to get to all of them.
Yeah, can I just
Mariella?
ask a question of Tavita?
Of course.
And also of Steve. And the question to Tavita is relating to Alauli's refusal to resign when he was charged for those various criminal offenses. I'm asking whether it's only a Pacific thing, because the same thing happened here in Tonga. A particular member, a cabinet minister, was charged, and the Prime Minister, Akilisi Pohiva, asked her to resign. And she refused. And her cabinet colleagues backed her up. And whereas in Australia and New Zealand, you know, a single, even a simple driving offense, I mean, a ticket for driving offense, people resign for that. So that's a question. Is that only the first time in Samoa? The question for Steve is, does he foresee a permanent role for the military in Fiji, in the governance of the country, similar to what the military's role in Indonesia? There are reserved seats for the military in Indonesia's parliament. Do you see that happening in Indonesia? Thank you.
Yeah, probably I'll start first because you know, you direct the question to. So yeah, it's Laul is of the view that he hasn't done anything wrong, and he shouldn't resign. And even the Prime Minister too wouldn't substantiate her decision to let him. But basically, that's the norm. You know, once you being charged for a conviction, whether it's a minor or whatever it is, you know, minister is supposed to step down. But in Lauli's case, you know, it's politics, and it's not as really straightforward as you think it is. You know, I mean, there are. I think there's the word setup, right? And I think that there was some conspiracy theories going on around here saying that, you know, he has been set up by the other faction, you know, that includes the Prime Minister and the others. And so that's why he insisted on, you know, standing his ground, and you know, and yeah, but that's the case. It's not as pretty, but he's been through the same process too. He's been charged, you know, remember way back when he was at HRBB, and he was being charged for some convictions, and he was yeah, at the judiciary, and the court says, you know, he was acquitted of all those convictions. So Yeah, but as I said, it's there's more to it than than meets the eye at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Levi. Yeah, in response to Lopet's question on the role of the military in Fiji in the future, interestingly, now the military is going through a process of reconciliation, of reviewing its historical role also now, and beginning to look at in a bigger context. And it's quite different from the former, if you like, regime and the political circumstances where the military was involved in the coup. And it's quite interesting how they are doing internal reconciliation, and also with particular groups they have been, they've hurt over the years. So it looks like there is some institutional recognition and consciousness about staying within the lane, the constitutional lane. Again, it's quite controversial what the Constitution says here, but I think they're beginning to rethink about their role in the future instead of the role of the Fiji military in the past has been worrying because of the way in which it has consistently gone over the legal line and through the coups and all those things. So in terms of what other countries like Indonesia, Burma is an extreme example. Thailand is another extreme example. I don't think the military will necessarily have a seat in parliament like in those countries, but the military in Fiji will still have a role, and I think that will be part of the discussion through the Reconciliation Commission, because the military has been involved in the Fiji politics directly since 1987, and then 2000, and then again 2006, and how they can do not only reconciliation but also institutional rethink about the future role, so that they stay within the parliamentary democratic lane rather than extra-legal engagement.
Thank you very much. We have two great questions from our attendees. The first one is from Melissa, Director of Partnerships, Divine Word in University from Papua New Guinea. And it's a question to all, although Mr. Lopeti would like to answer this question, so I'll give him the mic first. And it is, the political climate in each of our PICs has drastically changed compared to 50 years ago. Do you think a change in the current government systems will instigate greater political stability? Mr. Lopeti?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. I want to answer that question by giving you a discussion that took place in Tonga in 2010, prior to the reforms in Tonga taking place. I was privileged to be directed by the Prime Minister of the day, Dr. Sevele, to accompany two visitors from this company called Bell Spottinger from London. And Bell Spottinger has helped a lot of newly aspiring to be independent countries all over the world. And for example, Bell Spottinger helped put together South Africa's constitution, for example. Anyway, these two gentlemen came, and I accompanied them to visit George V, who was the king then in 2006. And from 2006 until 2012, and he presided over the reforms that we adopted in 2010. When I went with these two gentlemen to meet the king, their two questions were, is this constitution the most democratic constitution that you can come up with? And then secondly, is this the perfect constitution? And the king, George V, bless his soul, had a twinkle in his eye and a smile on his lips, and he said, only God's creation is perfect. The constitution we have adopted is created by human beings. Therefore, it is imperfect. And somewhere down the line, maybe 15 years or one generation down, the future leaders will get together and see, and will discuss whether or not the constitution that we adopted here in 2010 is still appropriate in 2025 or 2035. So the answer to your question is very much up to the people of the country of the day to decide whether or not their constitution is still appropriate. Their constitution, whether adopted at independence or adopted as a reform document in 15 years ago. That's my first response. The second response is what happened in the region. For example, the creation of the Pacific Island Forum. Pacific Island Forum was created because the leaders of the independent island countries felt they were being treated like small kids by the leaders of the big countries in the SPC, as it was called, South Pacific Commission land, way back in the 70s. And leaders of the smaller countries like Cook Islands, Nauru, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, got together and said, we must have our own organization. We must decide for ourselves. Remember, at that time, the French were testing their atmospheric testing, their nuclear bombs. The Americans had just completed testing in atmosphere in the Marshall Islands. And the leaders and the Pacific Island countries couldn't say anything because the South Pacific Commission refused to address their concern. So that is how the South Pacific Forum was created, which is now called the Pacific Island Forum. And of course, they had no dinero, no paisa. So they invited New Zealand and Australia to be part of the Pacific Island Forum. And the first South Pacific Forum meeting was held in Rotorua, hosted by Sir Keith Holyoake in 1979, I think it was. And that is how Pacific Island Forum was created, as it was called. The headquarters was called something Spartaca, the South Pacific Regional Trade Agreement or something. Anyway, that's the creation of. So are we at that stage where we need to rethink about the regional organization that we have? As we've all seen what happened with Trump and Vance ambushing Zelensky in the White House. The EU is reconsidering its relationship with the United States. And the US is trying to recruit Putin to its side in its conflict or its fight for supremacy with Xi Jinping. And it's willing to give up Ukraine to Russia in order for Russia to join the US alliance. So question is now for the Pacific Island countries, are we still going to be stuck together with Australia, New Zealand, and AUKUS and what have you, given these changes that are happening in our region and internationally, the collapse of the international world order that came into force after the collapse of the Berlin Wall in 89 and 19? Are we going to do something about that? Anyway, that's my answer. Malo.
Thank you very much, Lopeti. Would anyone else like to respond to this question?
Yeah, I promise to be very, very brief. Just very, very briefly. There are two questions there. I just want to very, very briefly respond to them. One is the question of the government system changes and the implications of that. And I think it's Lopeti talk about the dynamics of what's happening around in the region globally and how we have to respond to that, adapt to the changes. Certainly, it'll be a good idea to have discussions as widely as possible about the future direction of what kind of state system, what kind of government we want. Independence took place in the Pacific in the 1970s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So those systems of governance are still there. So conversations there'll be a new generation. So perhaps it's a good subject of a conference maybe next year for the hub to carry forward in terms of discussions around future governmental type of systems. The second one to do with votes of no confidence. Yeah, there's certainly been around for some time in the Pacific. And it's a sign of democracy. At the same time, can be seen as a sign of instability. So I suppose this should be part of the broader discussion of the kind of political system that I was talking about earlier. Because while it's an expression of democracy, at the same time, it can create instability. At the same time, it can eat up a lot of resources in terms of having elections all the time. Yeah, just briefly.
Thank you very much, Steve. Manoa asks, given that in the past 7 to 8 months, a number of PICs have tabled a motion of vote of no confidence against the government, which in 2 countries snap elections ensued. Given these situations, to what extent is Pacific governance affected? Tess?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, in order to answer that question, I just wanted to build on something that Steve raised about the balance of the use of motions of no confidence. And it is a democratic lever, as Steve has quite rightly said. I think one of the things that I've done some thinking about, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but it's something that doesn't often get discussed, which is the lack of understanding and commitment, including by way of resources, to what the meaningful role of a parliamentary opposition is. So when it comes to, often in the Pacific, Fiji less so, but in other Pacific parliaments, there's not that real sense of debating legislation on the floor of the House, putting questions to the government. There's not an established use of committee systems to give opposition MPs roles in shaping legislation, in actually being part of that legislative process. So the only lever that they seem to have, or that they feel they have to pull, is the motion of no confidence lever, which is, to get into government in order to be setting that agenda. And some of that also plays back to another kind of underlying issue, which is the understanding of the electorate as a whole as to what the role of a parliamentarian is. So, and this comes, you'll see this, we've talked about the way that parties come together, but in terms of the relationship between MPs and their constituents, or as they often refer to them, their voters, it's very much one, particularly in countries like Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, it's very much one of clientelism. So, we've elected you into parliament. It's your job to go and bring back stuff. There's not that sense that it's your job to go and think big thoughts about the nation as a whole and develop a legislative program and take forward policies that improve this nation as a whole. We have a particular MP in Vanuatu who has a very well-established track record, which will hopefully come to an end now, of jumping from side to side so that he is always on the side of government. And his response, when he's been questioned about that, his response is, my people elected me to be in government. And so if I have to change sides in order to stay in government, that's what I will do. The subtext is, that's where the resources are. That's where the opportunity is to deliver for my voters, not necessarily my constituents, but my voters. And that is what I will do. So all of those threads are still at play in politics in a number of Pacific Island countries, certainly in Vanuatu. Some of them are on the wane. Some of them are apparently entrenched, never to be shifted. But I think all of that underpins this conversation about what system of government do we want? Do we want one national constituency, or do we need different types of constituencies? We can do lots of talking about all of that machinery, but some of that underlying philosophical understanding is key to whether this machinery will have changes to the machinery will have any effect.
I agree with Tess about the usage and the availability of the vote of no confidence. It is a mechanism to keeping the government honest, the government of the day honest. And it has been used, okay, it has been overused in a number of areas previously where people have jumped ship midway through. And usually there is a honeymoon period given to the prime minister of the day. Like in Tonga, there is an 18-month honeymoon period soon after elections, and there is a 6-month honeymoon period before the next election. So there is a 2-year period during which votes of no confidence can be introduced. And Sovaleni, the last prime minister, survived the first motion of no confidence, but didn't survive the second one because, as he says, he thought this was a free country, but obviously the nobles were pressured to abandon him. And I suspect that the current Prime Minister Eke, is not going to survive with his current cabinet in the next election because it is made up of a coalition of politicians with different ideas about government. And they're from different places in the political spectrum. The Prime Minister himself is a royalist, but there are some extremists in his cabinet who will not vote for him should the crunch come. And I think it's a good mechanism, and I hope it's well, when it does happen, it is a numbers game, really. If you are the mover of a vote of no confidence, is he plays his cards right, regardless of what the issues he brings up against the government of the day. If he's got the numbers, he wins. And that's what the Prime Minister Sovaleni said. The issues that were brought up in the latest motion of no confidence, the vote of no confidence, 7 issues, they were all rubbish. But because there was the numbers were against him, he was no point in arguing against to have the motion of no confidence discussed in detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lopeti.
Yeah, just want to add on to yeah, I quite agree with Lopeti that yeah, it's a numbers game, and I think it's as a mechanism, it's that's the one of the tools that anybody could be able to apply when they see an opportunity for them to change the government, and for their benefit. So I quite agree with that. It's very mechanical. It's basically political. Yeah, but I mean, for us here, it's I think we put our own spin into it. So say, for example, in this the motion of no confidence against Fiamma, and so the other faction of the First Party, yeah, were able to vote for her just in order for them to fulfill their promises to the Samoan people that they're going to change those 3 legislations, and all that that the HRVP put forward. So it depends on how you see it, but as I say, it's part of our politics. It happens everywhere in the world, and it happens to us too. And we got to adjust and make the most of it, as a people or as voters. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Levi. We have a very good question from an anonymous attendee. The role of media and even access to social media, would this have had a more positive or negative impact on the political climate as information and disinformation has become accessible to a larger portion of society, including internationally, perhaps adding more fuel to the fire than merely informing the masses of political developments?
It is, I must say that it is what it is. The social media is very much part of the creation of the narrative, and the dominant narrative will be the persons or the party or the government that is able to control the narrative in spite of the different perceptions put through the traditional media and the social media. So it is what it is. You've got to live with it, and you better adapt to it as soon as possible. And which is why AI is doing a very successful, there's heavy investment in AI, especially DeepSeek coming out of China now. And well, it doesn't help, of course, that China itself is taking on a wolf warrior mode. You know, it's when it came to the 2018 forum in Nauru, and the Nauruan president, who is now the head of the Pacific Island Forum, he refused to give him speaking time because he had issued a letter to all foreign partners before arriving in Nauru. He said, your head of delegation must be ministerial level or above. The head of delegation from Beijing in 2018 was the president's special envoy. And according to the president of Nauru then, he said, no, that person is below ministerial level. And boy, did he kick up a fuss. Not only there in the forum meeting proper, during the meeting of the forum leaders and the development partners, but he also kicked up a fuss in the media and social media. So it is what it is. Get used to it. Thank you.
Yeah, just very, very quickly. Yeah, I mean, the social media now is very much part of the, as Lopeti said, of the mainstream means of communication and engagement. The different layers to it. One is that it can be deliberately used for disinformation, which is different from misinformation, is that you have an error of the kind of information that you have. Disinformation is deliberately distorting, creating fake news as a means of achieving your end, whether it's political or cultural, or whatever it might be. It's happening all around the world. And of course, the issue of power as well. You know, who controls that space? Of course, the big corporation. But then you also have means by which people are able to use it to empower themselves, to mobilize people of the same, like extreme views, for instance. So yeah, it depends very much on how it's used. Can be used very, very positively as a way of mobilizing people for democratic purposes. You have a term you use nowadays called digital democracy. And then also it can be used for negative purposes, for denigrating, for harming people online, and for marginalizing, particularly those who are vulnerable.
Thank you very much, Lopeti and Steve, for answering that question. This question is for Dr. Levy. Dr. Levy, you mentioned that Samoa has managed to maintain peace despite ongoing political upheaval. Given that, what are your thoughts on the increasingly heated and often divisive environment online, especially within the diaspora communities in New Zealand, Australia, and the United States?
Yeah, so those two guys have elaborated on that so brilliantly. So I wouldn't be able to, take that further as an argument. But I think Samoa's democracy, as you say, that it's still got some stability. You can wear the word instability, but I mean, it's still stable by far compared to other neighbors, Pacific neighbors. So, and I think in my PhD thesis, I was looking at this dilemma of trying to accommodate new things and the conflict that comes with it as well. So the new things and the old stuff, old elements that come together and try to fuse together and define that sort of like a place of common ground. And I think it works very well for Samoa. As I said, it is a fusion of many things: cultural, democratic, religious, a mix of the old and the new. We don't have an army or a formidable police presence. Rather, we have battalion villages whose supportive role played an important part in maintaining order and security. And so is the church, we have the church leadership who also does their part in the maintenance of harmony and order. So through the social media and people hiding behind it, they're and doing that, but it's still very much, things are very much in order on the ground, so to say. So that's what I take. Now we're good at that, that this did and that and all of that. But I mean, when it comes to the serious stuff and what holds things together, it is our culture and our that relationship, and we say that Samoa is a family. So I think that that's how we see things. Families quarrel, and families they have differences sometimes, but I mean they all know that they belong to this big unit of as a family or as a unit. Yeah, so that's my take. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lavi. Unfortunately, we have gotten to the end of our webinar. There've been so many questions and fantastic questions online, and unfortunately, we've not been able to get to all of them. If your questions have not been answered, please send them to me or to one of the organizers, and we'll ensure that they reach the speakers. So I wanted to thank all of the speakers for their amazing presentations and their answers. I'm sure that we've all learned a lot from listening to them. I'd like to thank Ariella and Holly for the logistical mahi. I would like to extend thanks and appreciation to the Pacific Regional Security Hub and for our speakers. And before I close off, I'd like to remind everyone that on the 19th of March, we'll be having our second webinar on China and US in the Pacific, especially with China's recent activities down south and with Trump's policies in regards to the Pacific. So please join us on the 19th of March. And Steve, if we have 1 minute, if you'd like to add a few words.
Oh, no, I think you've managed to say everything. So thanks so much, everybody, for this inaugural webinar. And we hope to see you again in the coming weeks. So thank you so much once again to all the panel members, Lopeti, Tess, and Levi, and of course to Holly and Ariella, our behind-the-scene operators, and of course Jose. Thank you so much for doing a brilliant job in putting all these things together. Thank you so much. Yeah. So we see you soon. Yeah.
Thank you.